The billionaire overheard the waitress praying for her child. What he did next changed both their lives forever. What if a single overheard prayer could change two lives forever? Elena Rodriguez had been working double shifts at Murphy's Diner for 3 months straight, her tired hands moving automatically as she wiped down tables in the empty restaurant. It was past midnight, and she thought she was alone when she knelt beside Booth 7, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke to God about her son's mounting medical bills. She had no idea that James Mitchell, the billionaire tech entrepreneur, sat hidden in the corner booth, having stopped for coffee after another sleepless night of business deals. He'd been scrolling through acquisition reports when her quiet, desperate words reached him. "Please, just help me find a way to save my little boy. I'll work every hour you give me, but I can't lose him." 2. James froze, his phone forgotten, as this stranger's raw pain cut through his carefully constructed world of numbers and profits. "Where are you watching from tonight?" James Mitchell had built his empire from nothing, turning a small software company into a billion-dollar technology giant that employed thousands. At 42, he lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city, attended charity galas where people competed for his attention, and hadn't eaten at a roadside diner in over a decade. But tonight, after another board meeting that stretched past midnight, he'd found himself driving aimlessly through neighborhoods he'd forgotten existed. When hunger finally struck, Murphy's Diner was the only place with its neon sign still flickering. Elena had been surviving on 3 hours of sleep and determination since her 8-year-old son Miguel was diagnosed with a rare heart condition 6 months ago. The insurance covered basic treatment, but the experimental surgery that could save his life cost more than she'd earned in 5 years. Her husband had died in a construction accident 2 years earlier, leaving her with their son in a mountain of debt she was still climbing. Every tip, every extra shift, every dollar went toward Miguel's medical fund that seemed to grow smaller instead of larger as his condition worsened. She'd been working at Murphy's for 4 years, starting as a way to supplement her day job at a grocery store. Now it was her lifeline, even though the late-night shifts meant leaving Miguel with her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who refused payment but worried Elena with her increasingly frail health. Elena had learned to hide her exhaustion behind practiced smiles, to laugh with regular customers who didn't know her son was slowly dying while she served their coffee. James watched from his corner booth as Elena moved through her closing routine with mechanical precision. She was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her late 30s, with streaks of gray threading through dark hair she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was clean but worn, and she moved like someone who'd learned to ignore pain. He'd seen that same determined exhaustion in his own mother's face during the years before his business succeeded, when she worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment. When Elena disappeared into the kitchen, James heard the soft sound of crying. He should have left then, should have paid his bill and returned to his insulated world of quarterly reports and profit margins. Instead, he found himself listening as Elena's voice drifted from the back of the restaurant. She wasn't on the phone. She was praying with a desperation that made his chest tighten. Her words painted a picture of sleepless nights in hospital waiting rooms, of a little boy who asked why mommy cried when she thought he couldn't see, of bills that arrived faster than paychecks. "I don't know what else to do," Elena whispered to the empty kitchen. "The doctors say we have maybe 2 months before it's too late for the surgery. I've applied for every program, every grant, every charity. I sold everything we had except his drawings from the refrigerator. I can't ask Mrs. Chen for money she doesn't have, and the bank already said no twice." James had attended 100 charity dinners where people wrote checks for causes they'd forget by morning. He'd donated millions to hospitals whose boards thanked him with plaques he never displayed. But he'd never heard poverty speak with such raw honesty, never witnessed someone bargaining with God in a way that stripped every pretense from prayer. Elena returned to the dining room, unaware that her private moment of desperation hadn't been private at all. She approached James's table with professional composure, though he noticed her slightly swollen eyes and the way her hands trembled as she refilled his coffee cup. "I'm sorry for the wait," she said, her voice steady despite everything he'd overheard. "Can I get you anything else tonight?" James studied her face, seeing strength that most of his business associates would never possess. Here was someone fighting an impossible battle with grace, never knowing that her prayers had found an unlikely listener. "Actually, I was wondering about your son," he said carefully, watching her expression shift from professional politeness to guarded surprise. "I'm sorry." Elena stepped back slightly, her protective instincts sharpening. She'd learned to be wary of strangers who asked personal questions, especially at midnight in an empty diner. "I couldn't help but overhear you in the kitchen," James admitted, immediately regretting his directness when he saw her face flush with embarrassment. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I understand what it's like to feel helpless when someone you love is in danger." Elena's first instinct was to deny everything, to pretend he'd misheard or misunderstood. But exhaustion had worn away her ability to maintain facades, and something in the stranger's eyes suggested he wasn't judging her moment of vulnerability. "He has a heart condition," she said simply, her voice barely audible. "The surgery that could fix it costs more than I'll ever have." James had been prepared for her defensiveness, but not for the quiet acceptance in her tone. She wasn't asking for anything, wasn't even looking for sympathy. She was simply stating a fact that had become her reality. "How old is he?" he asked. 8. "He'll be 9 next month, if..." Elena stopped herself, unable to voice the alternative. "He loves drawing pictures of superheroes. Says when he gets better, he wants to help other sick kids feel brave." The image hit James unexpectedly hard. He thought of his own nephew, who was Miguel's age and complained about having to eat vegetables. Miguel was fighting for his life while dreaming of helping others. "What's the name of his condition?" Elena hesitated, then decided this stranger had already heard her darkest moment. "Hypoplastic left heart syndrome with complications. The surgery is called a Fontan completion, but there are only a few surgeons who can perform it successfully. We got on a waiting list at Children's Hospital in Boston, but..." She shrugged helplessly. "The deposit alone is $40,000. James felt something shift inside him, a recognition he hadn't experienced since he was 12 and watched his mother count pennies for groceries. Elena wasn't asking for rescue. She was simply carrying a burden too heavy for one person while refusing to let it break her. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. "I run a technology company," he said finally. "We have a corporate foundation that focuses on medical assistance for families in crisis. Would you be willing to let me make some calls tomorrow?" Elena stared at him, afraid to hope and equally afraid to refuse. "I don't understand. You don't even know us." "Sometimes that doesn't matter," James replied, thinking of all the ways his life had been shaped by strangers who chose kindness when they could have chosen indifference. The next morning brought Elena crashing back to reality. Miguel had woken up pale and breathless, his lips tinged with the blue that sent her racing to the emergency room. As she sat in the pediatric waiting room, holding her son's small hand while machines monitored his struggling heart, the stranger from the diner felt like a dream she'd imagined during her moment of desperation. Dr. Peterson emerged from Miguel's room with the expression Elena had learned to dread. "His condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated," she said gently. "We need to move up our timelines significantly. If we're going to proceed with the surgery, we have perhaps 3 weeks, not 2 months." Elena felt the world tilt around her. 3 weeks meant the deposit would be due in days, not the months she'd been desperately hoping to somehow piece together. "Doctor, I'm still working on the financial arrangements. Is there any possibility of..." "I understand your situation, Mrs. Rodriguez, and I wish I could change our policies. But the surgical team in Boston requires payment before scheduling. Without that deposit, Miguel's name moves to the bottom of the waiting list." Dr. Peterson's voice carried genuine sadness. "I've seen too many families lose precious time hoping for miracles that don't come." Miguel squeezed his mother's hand with surprising strength. "Mama, don't cry. Remember what you always tell me. Sometimes angels come when we're not looking." Elena managed to smile for her son, but inside she felt something breaking. She'd exhausted every option, applied to every charity, begged every bank. The stranger's offer felt like false hope now, another well-meaning promise that would evaporate in daylight. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "How is Miguel? I talked to my church group. We raised $347. I know it's not much, but every little bit helps, right?" Elena stayed at the message, overwhelmed by the kindness of people who had so little giving what they could. $300 when she needed $40,000 felt like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. But it represented love from a community that had embraced her and Miguel as family. That evening, as Elena returned to work despite Dr. Peterson's suggestion that she take family leave, she found herself watching every customer who entered Murphy's. Part of her hoped the stranger would return, while another part felt foolish for believing someone she'd met for 5 minutes could change their desperate situation. Around 10 o'clock, a young woman in an expensive suit entered the diner. She approached Elena directly, her expression serious but kind. "Are you Elena Rodriguez? My name is Patricia Wells. I work for Mitchell Technologies. Mr. Mitchell asked me to speak with you about your son's situation." Elena's hands began to shake as she set down the coffee pot. "He actually called." He did more than call. He spent the entire day researching Miguel's condition and speaking with pediatric cardiac surgeons. Mr. Mitchell has specific questions about Miguel's treatment team and surgical timeline. Would you have a few minutes to talk? Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Elena looked around the busy diner, then at Patricia's patient expression. Sometimes, she realized, angels really did come when you weren't looking, wearing business suits instead of wings. 3 days later, Elena found herself in the most elegant office building she'd ever entered, riding an elevator to the 42nd floor with Miguel beside her. He'd insisted on wearing his best shirt, the one with tiny superheroes printed on it, and carried a folded piece of paper in his small fist. "I drew this for the nice man," he'd whispered to Elena that morning. "It's him as a superhero, helping sick kids." James Mitchell's office surprised Elena with its warmth. Instead of the cold corporate space she'd expected, she found comfortable chairs arranged around a coffee table, children's artwork framed on the walls, and photos of what appeared to be family gatherings. James himself seemed different in daylight, less intimidating than the mysterious stranger from the diner, though his eyes held the same quiet intensity. "Miguel," James said, kneeling to the boy's eye level, "I've heard you're quite an artist." Miguel's shyness lasted only moments before he unfolded his drawing. "I made this for you. Patricia told me you help kids like me, so I drew you with a cape. My mama says real superheroes don't always wear capes, but I think you should have one anyway." James accepted the drawing with genuine reverence, studying the crayon figure labeled Mr. James the Helper surrounded by smiling children. "This is the most incredible artwork anyone's ever given me. Would it be okay if I framed this for my office?" Elena watched her son beam with pride, and for the first time in months, she saw him look like the child he still was beneath his brave facade. "Miguel, why don't you look at the fish tank while Mr. Mitchell and I talk?" she suggested. James waited until Miguel was absorbed in watching the colorful fish before speaking. "Elena, I've spoken with Dr. Peterson and the surgical team in Boston. Miguel's case is complex, but the surgeon I've arranged is the best pediatric cardiac specialist in the country. Dr. Martinez has performed this exact procedure over 300 times with a 96% success rate." Elena's breath caught. "Mr. Mitchell, I haven't even applied to your foundation yet. Patricia said there would be paperwork." "There's no foundation involved," James said quietly. "This is personal. The surgery is scheduled for next week. All expenses are covered. The procedure, hospital stay, your accommodations in Boston, and Miguel's recovery period. There's also an education fund set up for his future." Elena stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "I don't understand. You don't know us. Why would you? Do you remember what Miguel told you in the hospital? Sometimes angels come when we're not looking." James smiled gently. "I lost my father when I was 7. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, and strangers helped us when we needed it most. A teacher who bought me school supplies, a neighbor who drove me to soccer practice, a boss who let my mother bring me to work when I was sick. I learned that kindness isn't about deserving help. It's about being human." Miguel returned from the fish tank, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mama, did you see the blue one? He was hiding behind the castle. Just like you said, brave people sometimes have to hide their scared feelings." If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Elena looked at her son, then at James, understanding that their lives were about to change in ways she'd never dared hope possible. 6 months later, Miguel Rodriguez ran across the playground at Lincoln Elementary School, his laughter carrying on the autumn breeze as he chased friends in a game of tag. His surgical scar had faded to a thin line beneath his Superman t-shirt, and his energy seemed boundless to anyone who hadn't known him before. Elena watched from a park bench, still marveling at the simple miracle of seeing her son play like other children. James had visited Miguel twice during his recovery in Boston, bringing books and art supplies each time. The billionaire and the 8-year-old had developed an unlikely friendship built on shared drawings and stories. Miguel had taught James about different superhero powers, while James shared tales of building companies and solving problems. The best superpower, Miguel had declared during one visit, is making other people feel better. Elena had tried repeatedly to discuss repayment plans with James, but he'd consistently redirected those conversations. "The only payment I want is seeing Miguel grow up healthy," he'd said, "and maybe the occasional drawing for my office walls." True to his word, Miguel's artwork now covered an entire wall in James Mitchell's office, each piece carefully framed and labeled with a date. The real surprise had come when James offered Elena a position managing community outreach for Mitchell Technologies' new initiative supporting families facing medical crises. "You understand what these families need because you've lived it," he'd explained. "Your compassion, combined with organizational skills, could help us reach people who fall through traditional charity gaps." Elena had accepted, finding purpose in work that felt like an extension of her own journey. She now helped other parents navigate insurance complexities, connected families with resources, and sometimes simply listened when they needed someone who understood their fears. Her salary was modest by corporate standards, but revolutionary for her family's stability. Mrs. Chen had become an honorary grandmother to Miguel, attending his school performances and celebrating his improved health as enthusiastically as any blood relative. The elderly neighbor often remarked that prayers were sometimes answered in unexpected packages, delivered by people who looked nothing like what you'd imagined. Miguel still drew superheroes, but his pictures had evolved to include real people performing acts of kindness. His latest series featured doctors, teachers, neighbors helping neighbors, and Mr. James, who listens to prayers even when he's not supposed to be listening. Each drawing carried the same message. Heroes come in ordinary clothes, doing extraordinary things when someone needs help. Elena had learned that James continued supporting other families quietly, never seeking publicity or recognition. He'd established a foundation with Elena's help, but preferred that his involvement remain private. "The goal isn't gratitude," he'd explained. "It's giving people the chance to write their own happy endings." As Miguel raced back toward her, his cheeks flushed from running, Elena felt overwhelmed by the cascading kindness that had saved not just her son's life, but restored her faith in human goodness. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest gestures: a stranger choosing to care instead of walking away, a prayer overheard and answered by someone who could have chosen indifference. Miguel threw his arms around her neck, still breathless from playing. "Mama, I love you more than all the superheroes combined." "I love you too, my brave boy," Elena whispered, holding her healthy son close. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of hope, kindness, and the angels who appear when we need them most.